Hello, guys. Welcome back to our 81 months of the Dao De Jing, starting with chapter 1. So I think we've satisfactorily moved past the first section, right? Dao Ke Dao, Fei Chang Dao, Ming Ke Ming, Fei Chang Ming. And we can move on to another section, which is Wu Ming Tian Di Zhi Shi You Ming Wan Wu Zhi Mu, right? So without a name was the beginning of heaven and earth. Named, it was the mother of the myriad beings. So there are a number of different ways to approach this line of text. Today, I'm going to use one particular understanding from the past abbot of the White Cloud Temple in Beijing, Zhen Yang. So Zhen Yang was the abbot of the White Cloud Temple in the 80s and during part of the 1990s. Incidentally, he taught internal alchemy to many secular people, as well as obviously teaching Daoist clergy. He wrote two major books, one of which is an annotation of the Dao De Jing. We are going to borrow a section of his first chapter in order to analyze this concept of Wu Ming Tian Di Zhi Shi You Ming Wan Wu Zhi Mu, which you'll find out over the next few videos is relatively complex subject which isn't universally agreed on in terms of what the grammar actually means. Okay, so I'm going to give you a really simple breakdown. The two operative terms that are disputed are Wu Ming and Yo Ming. So Wu means no or non-being, Ming means name, Yo means to have or to be, and Ming again means name. So it could mean non-being is called the beginning of heaven and earth, and being is called the mother of all things. Or it could be without a name is the beginning of heaven and earth, and with name is the mother of all things. I think that in the English translations, it's more common to see the latter than the former, but I like the former personally. So Zhen Yang is going to give us his understanding of this concept. This is about the first half of his first chapter annotation. Incidentally, Zhen Yang was the teacher of my teacher, Hai Yang. I never met Abbot Cao in person. I make absolutely no claim to having any kind of representation of his thought. I only know what I learned from my teacher and then also from reading the Daoist classics, but it is interesting to consider that there's some indirect relationship there. Okay, so let's have a look at what he has to say. Zhen Yangzi said. So Zhen Yangzi is his Daoist name. Zhen means thunder. Zhen Yangzi. Okay. This is the first use of the word Dao, or this first use of the word Dao is the pre-heaven extreme of non-being, great Dao, which is the mother that generates heaven and earth. This mother is the center. The center is the mother of heaven and earth. It's also the center of humans. It does not incline or jut out. It is the great root of humans. It is also the great root of heaven and earth. The fifth chapter says, the space between heaven and earth, is it not like a bellows? Okay, so basically what he's saying here is this concept of Tao is the original center from which all things emerge, and it is unbiased, and it doesn't incline toward yin or toward yang, since it generates both of them. It is the utmost of non-being. Okay, so this is a central premise. He says, empty, and it does not bend, its movement only increases. Speaking much and endlessly enumerating is not as good as guarding the center. So that's a quote from chapter 5 of the Dao De Jing. The Tao of guarding the center is explained in the 20th chapter, which says, I alone am different from others and value feeding on the mother. So in other words, this is going to be their rationale for why we practice internal alchemy. We use the non-being state, which is the great mother of ultimate non-being, in order to nourish our vital energy and attain longevity, and ultimately return to the Tao. To come across the joy of longevity and long happiness requires guarding the center. Guarding the center means observing stillness. This is how to call on the old mother of absolute non-being, so one may feed on her breast. Okay, I hope I don't get shadow banned because I use anatomical terms. Anyway, so then what of the Tao which may be spoken? Okay, what of the Tao which may be spoken? Why is it that we say Dao Ke Dao? So he says, the Tao which may be spoken is not the long and eternal Tao. The myriad beings are born and die. In other words, those phenomena that you see before you, are not the constant Dao. They're the regular way of things coming into the world, going through their various processes and then dying. So none of them can be said to be eternal. Therefore, any kind of phenomenon is illusory because phenomena are ultimately impermanent. So we can't call that the true Dao. That's his base argument there. What of the name that can be named? It's also not the constant name. It's just a name we use to explain some phenomena as they go past, right? So the time when there was no name was the beginning of heaven and earth. Okay, so you can start to see his argument unfolding here. So he says, then the absolute of non-being gave birth to the great origin of being. Then there were heaven and earth, yin and yang. This was the mother of the myriad things. In the space of the universe, there are being and non-being. Originally, they leave as one. One is the absolute of non-being, breaking open as one. It rises up and acts as the absolute of non-being, the original beginning. Okay, so the absolute of non-being generates the original beginning, right? This is the key point in Taoism, is that the Tao is beyond regular conceptions of being and non-being, right? So we think of being and non-being approximately as being tied to the concept of emptiness and fullness, right? Something is empty, it appears that there's not much space, there's not much going on in the space there, right? Of course, there is something going on. And Taoism allows for that with the concepts of that which is subtle, that which is minute, that which is raised, right? But nonetheless, emptiness seems to support fullness, right? It's one of the main topics of the Dao De Jing. So being and non-being are also in a similar category to that. They're bivalent ontologies, as our friend Descartes might have, I mean, not Descartes, sorry, as our friend Derrida might have said. But having said that, non-being and being, they're part of the generative process of the world. And then beyond that, there's an ultimate non-being, which has absolutely no characteristic whatsoever, right? Non-being always supports being within it. Being always supports non-being within it, right? It's the idea of Wuji and Taiji. But then ultimately, there's a time before that where there's really, really nothing. And that's considered to be the place that the Tao inhabits, right? So there's latent potentiality of the Tao, which generates all being. That's the basic argument. So he says, within the center of absolute non-being, the center contains yin and yang. Being and non-being mutually emerge from the pre-heaven old center of absolute non-being. So this is sort of what I was just trying to say. One mother births two children. One is called being, and one is called non-being, and one is called being. Although non-being is generated, being comes along. Although there's being, in the end it returns to non-being. This is why they emerge together but are differently named. So what Zhen Yangzi is basically saying is that when you look at this section of text, right, Wu Ming, Yi Tian Di Zhi Shi, right, non-being is at the beginning of the universe, right? You Ming Wan Wu Zhi Mu, right? Being is the mother of the myriad living things, or the myriad things. Then the idea here is that these two categories are mutually supportive. Non-being predates being, it's generated by the Tao, and then the Tao generates, or non-being generates being within it, right? So another way to say it is that there's a very, very large yin and yang in the universe, and the ultimate point of yin is representative of extreme stillness, extreme ability to nurture, extreme supportive ability, right? But it's devoid of any kind of life or any kind of activity. So that's why we call it a kind of non-being. On the other hand, the beginning of yang emerges from within that non-being state, and it has a quality of being alive, but it requires yin in order to support it. It requires a stillness state in order to support it. And therefore, over time, as the yang develops within that stillness state, then it's able to become strong enough that it can eventually break out of its stillness shell, and it can go into the world. And if that seems like a very kind of obscure philosophical idea, it's actually based on the idea of, let's say, like a seed germinating, or a fetus growing from an embryo and then growing up and becoming a fetus before it's born and then finally being born, or a chick being within an egg until it hatches, right? So you have this yin shell, let's say a womb, right, because it's relevant to our meditation practice. You have a yin shell like a womb, and the fetus is growing up from this really impossibly small state, right, at one cell, basically, like father and mother's genetic information merging and forming a cell which gradually multiplies and multiplies. And eventually, by the time the mother has a baby bump, right, it's tangible that there's something going on there, but it's still kind of a mystery, right? It hasn't been born yet. This is the state that Zhen Yangzi is talking about here. The Tao is like the original mother that generates all things. And so, therefore, it ought to follow the same kind of continence or general sort of functionality that all mothers follow, right? This is the basic argument about why we would say Wuming is non-being is named rather than without a name, because without a name it's not as strong of a statement, right? The without a name statement, it just means when the universe was first created, nobody was around to give it a name. Now we'll look at another take on that because there's more than one way to analyze this point. So I'll follow up with another video in a few days to talk about Wuming and Yoming as without name and with name, because those are also very potent arguments. And I don't believe that there's one right argument about the Dao De Jing. Just like I put out a video not too long ago talking about Nan Huaiqian and his analysis of the character Dao, its second use, right? Dao potentially meaning to speak, or whether it means something else. As with all of these things, this text is very, very old. There's plenty of people throughout history and today who believe that they understand the true meaning of the text. But in my opinion, it's so much more enjoyable to hold open questions about it and to experiment with it and to take the text on the strength of this very sort of open and general idea building that all kind of goes in the same direction, right? We still end up with the Tao. We still end up with the processes that the Tao undertakes, even though sometimes it can be hard to define, the names and so on, right? Just like Lao Tzu says at the start. Okay, so that's that for today's little talk. I'm going to put up the text on Substack. I'll link that in the description. And then also, if you want to take the course, we're most of the way through chapter 1. So you'll get the benefit of those classes already being recorded if you're, signing up in late November of 2025, and anytime after that, it's all pre-recorded. And we're going to keep going from there. You can join anytime you want, any chapter. My main idea is that I want to get a really clear view of the Dao De Jing over the period of 81 months, so 1 month per chapter, and also look at it from the internal alchemy perspective. If you think that's a cool idea, the link is in the description. Okay, so see you in the next one. Give me a shout out in the comments section. Tell me what you think. Are these videos good? Am I dead wrong? It's all good. Okay, see you soon.